Hello, my fellow schizotypals. Did you hear that noise? What up, doe? And welcome back to High Lit with Karhlyle Fletcher. Anyways, getting into today's episode, we're going to be talking about cannabis and motivation. We've discussed this before with how to talk about cannabis with elderly loved ones. But also just going into some general research, then going into Jules De Bruycker's work again. And shouts out Zelooperz because just really great guy. Music's amazing. I'm not going to play any of his stuff because I certainly do not own it in any capacity. Also, shouts out Pure Green and shouts out Stephen Goldner because, Pure Green's done great work recently. They're, releasing studies and trials like that, and it really is, I do believe in private sector development, especially in cannabis, where the government really just has not been there and has not shown up and done well, so anyways, let's get into it. This is so strange. I don't even know. Oh no, wrong thing. We're using a different camera again because I can't figure out how to get GoPro to want to work with me for the life of me. How silly does this look? I think how long are we committing to the bit? So the evidence is lacking for cannabis users slacking. A longitudinal analysis of escalating cannabis use and motivation among adolescents. So reduced motivation is often noted as a consequence of cannabis use. However, previous work has yielded mixed result and focused largely on adults. To address these limitations, this study examined longitudinal associations between cannabis use and self-reported motivation in a large adolescent sample. Participants were 401 adolescents aged 14 to 17 at baseline who completed 5 biannual assessments. We assessed motivation at 3 time points using 2 self-reporting questionnaires, the apathy evaluation scale and the motivational and engagement scale. Disengagement, persistence, planning, self-efficacy, and valuing school subscales. Controlling for relevant covariates, we use latent growth curve modeling to characterize pattern of cannabis use and motivation over time, examining bidirectional influences between these processes. On average, adolescent cannabis user use frequency increased significantly over time. The disengagement and planning facets of motivation also increased significantly over time, whereas other aspects of motivation remained stable. At baseline, greater cannabis use was associated with greater disengagement, lower planning, and lower valuing of school. Greater cannabis baseline use also predicted lesser increases in disengagement over time. After controlling for the effects of sex, depression, and use of alcohol and nicotine, only the baseline associations between cannabis use and valuing school remain significant. Our results do not support a prospective link between cannabis use and reduced motivation among adolescents. Although most observed associations were accounted for by covariates, greater cannabis use was cross-sectionally associated with lower perceived value of school, which may contribute to poorer educational and later life outcomes. So let's just get into it. Motivation is multifaceted construct. Motivation is a multifaceted construct that encompasses the cognitions, emotions, and behaviors involved in the activation, execution, and persistence of goal-directed behavior. Reduced motivation is often noted as a consequence of heavy and/or chronic cannabis use. This phenomenon is commonly referred to as amotivational syndrome, a term that describes the introversion, passivity, and lack of achievement orientation commonly observed among adult cannabis users. And that study's reference from 1968. A recent systematic review of studies examining associations between cannabis use and motivation concluded that evidence from cross-sectional studies was equivocal. Evidence from 2 longitudinal studies using cross-legged panel models, on the other hand, lend support to the hypothesis that heavy cannabis use leads to reduction in motivation and or reward sensitivity among adult adults. Several positron emission tomography studies have also examined associations between cannabis use and dopamine, an important neurotransmitter in the context of motivation due to its role in reward-seeking behavior. Results from these studies suggest that adult heavy cannabis users showed reduced dopamine synthesis capacity and reactivity in corticostriatal areas. These dopaminergic alterations also correlated with lower ratings of motivation on self-report questionnaires. However, because these studies focused on adults with high level of cannabis use, it is not yet clear whether these findings generalize to individuals with lower levels of use or have been using for shorter periods of time. I also find that fascinating because, to the best of my knowledge, that is also how antipsychotics work. So it's like with a schizophrenic, the issue is that you have an excess of dopamine or that you're having too much sensory input. That's why it's described as like having too much empathy, is that it's this flood of neurotransmitter and other chemicals making the individual more prone to take feelings and other extrasensory information more seriously than you might if you were, a little bit more balanced. And so if cannabis is shown to have effects that does limit dopamine sensitivity or production, then wouldn't that hypothetically also be a pathway to treatment for psychotic and other conditions that are in some way related to the overproduction of dopamine? I don't know, I'm not a medical professional, but it seems to me that that is a pregnant topic to discuss. The effects of cannabis use on motivation are even less clear among adolescents, with a few existing studies yielding mixed result. So there was a body of work that it leads to poor educational outcomes, including higher rate of dropout, lower academic achievement, and lower educational attainment. So it's presumed that this reflects lower academic motivation, but a recent 2017, or not, well, recent, but 2017 study shows that it might raise academic desire but lower academic performance. So like you might desire to do better but not have. So it's like it's weird because it's like a lack of follow through, but the motivation is still there. So in addition, it might increase depressive psychopathology, including apathy, as well as other related constructs like anhedonia. However, the evidence is mixed, and the temporality of these associations is not yet clear. It may be a risk factor for, rather than a consequence of, escalation in cannabis use. Talking about anhedonia, which is essentially the lack of ability to feel pleasure. So it increased depressive symptoms over time among males, but baseline depression failed to predict changes in cannabis use. And many studies have failed to control for depression when working on cannabis. We've previously examined cross-sectional associations between cannabis use and self-reported motivation in a small subset of participants finding null results. But this is the follow-up to that. 401 adolescents recruited from Miami-Dade County middle and high schools, as well as through community posters and word-of-mouth referrals. The sample consisted of participants from a study examining longitudinal associations between decision-making, episodic memory, and cannabis use trajectories. Main outcomes for that study are discussed elsewhere. Eligibility for the parent study was ascertained via phone. Excuse me. So, in order to recruit a sample at risk for escalation in cannabis use, the sample overrepresented participants with the recent use of cannabis. Specifically, use of alcohol, cigarettes, or cannabis, even minimal, was an inclusion criteria. However, by design, approximately 10% of the sample was allowed to have no history of substance use, so that they had control. And they were also not trying to find people who already had heavy alcohol or cannabis abuse disorder. So the primary aims of the parent study what might influence growth in cannabis use, as well as the development of cannabis use disorder. So they're choosing to exclude people who you might be able to call addicts. And the measures that they were doing were substance use, motivation, mental health, and then there was this analytic plan. And it was very interesting because with this table, so as shown in the supplementary table 1, several covariates demonstrated consistent significant effects across models. For instance, participant age significantly influenced the cannabis use intercept, such that older adolescents reported greater frequency of cannabis use at baseline. Sex significantly impacted the cannabis use intercept and slope, such that males reported greater frequency of cannabis use at baseline, as well as greater increase in cannabis use over time. There was also a significant effect of sex on the intercepts of several motivation indices, suggesting that females reported lower apathy and greater persistence, planning, and valuing of school than males at baseline. Importantly, depression had a small to moderate effect on several indices of motivation, with greater depression predicting greater apathy and disengagement, as well as lower persistence, planning, and valuing of school. Effects of alcohol and nicotine on motivation were largely insignificant. I think that, so a conversation I think that just tie into this is also, here there's the boys who test well, who test the same as girls, are underperforming because of also being graded for classroom behavior, which essentially correlates to, do you listen to authority? Will you sit down, shut the fuck up, and let somebody talk at you for an hour at least while you take notes? Most boys and most men, I know, fuck no. But women are more prone to do things like that. They'll watch Love Island for 8 hours in a row. So it is just, I think it is there is a major difference in things like that. And we can discuss, there's a lot of discussions about this, but ultimately I do think that there is, homework is for girls and it's more tuned for them. The classroom is for girls, while testing is more geared towards men. And so both things could accommodate either more, because it's with girls, they tend to underperform when given stress, and stress is shown to really negatively impact female academic performance, whereas for boys, you have these weird cases of boys who are F students that get A's on some tests because it's they just simply don't value the structure. They do not value the school. So after controlling for sex, baseline age, depression, and use of alcohol and nicotine, most associations between cannabis use and motivation attenuated to non-significance. However, the association between the intercepts of cannabis use and the valuing of school subscale remained significant. Thus, after controlling for potential confounds, greater cannabis use was cross-sectionally associated with lower valuing of school. There was also a trend toward significance in associations between cannabis use and disengagement intercepts, which suggests that participants with a higher level of cannabis use also reported greater disengagement. So, because sex had a significant effect on cannabis use, they analyzed that further, and what they found was that in self-efficacy, if boys were more scored higher in self-efficacy, it did not matter. But for girls who scored higher in self-efficacy, they reported increasing their use of cannabis over time more. And to me, the reason why I brought up the differences between males and females is that if you have a girl who is naturally inclined to succeed at school, she naturally works well with authority, she's naturally orderly, she's naturally has just a schedule and things like that, so it's her lifestyle and her inherent characteristics are rewarded by the school system. If she smokes weed, it's not going to be that bad, so for that, it's just not that kind of girl is going to be able to smoke as much weed as she wants. So it's the more weed that she adds, it's not going to impact her grades really, because her grades are more based on her inherent characteristics. Not to say that she doesn't deserve it, but it's the speaking in a way that is completely devoid of argumentative or offensive language, things like that, you know, where it's like having that sort of mindset or philosophy that naturally is in tune with the environment. And so when if a girl's not like that, you get like a little bit more of a tomboy girl who has like more masculine attributes, and she's like more independent, and she's more, you know, prone to try to figure things out herself. She smokes weed, it might like really fuck up her performance because she'll start acting more and more naturally, which will be deeply, you know, targeted by the school. So to me, that's why I would say that, like, again, that's not a medical opinion, but just conjecture. I think that could be a possible explanation for what is going on with this, you know. So the current study examined longitudinal associations between adolescent cannabis use and different aspects of self-reported motivation to test the hypothesis that higher levels of cannabis use are associated with lower levels or reductions of motivation over time. The number of days that participants reported using cannabis during the 6 months prior to study visited increased significantly across the 5 measurement waves, which occurred every 6 months over 2 years. Our results showed differing patterns of change across measures of motivation. Specifically, participants' disengagement and planning evidence remained significant over time, whereas apathy, persistence, self-efficacy, and valuing school remained stable. Findings from parallel process models suggest that at baseline, greater cannabis use frequency was significantly associated with greater disengagement, as well as lowering planning and valuing of school. Greater baseline cannabis use also predicted lesser increases in disengagement over time, but failed to predict changes in all motivation indices. However, after controlling for covariates, only the association between cannabis use and valuing of school remained significant. Across all models, baseline levels of motivation did not predict change in cannabis use, and change in cannabis use across assessment weights fails to predict change in motivation over time. So the two were not found to be correlated. Together, however, our findings suggest that cannabis users may display lower levels of certain aspects of motivation. However, most of these associations can be explained by other factors, particularly participant demographics such as age and sex and depression. Further, despite significant increases in level of cannabis use in our own sample, change in cannabis use did not predict changes in motivation, which suggests that cannabis use may not lead to reductions in motivation over time. Nonetheless, we found that greater cannabis use was associated with lower perceived value of school at baseline, even after controlling for covariates. This is in line with prior work suggesting that adolescent cannabis users tend to adopt alternative, anti-conventional lifestyles, which may ultimately contribute to the poor educational outcomes observed among cannabis users. I am the only motherfucker that got published in my entire goddamn class. And the reason why I bring that up is that it's like, it is the working class and my working class friends that are casual cannabis consumers. Like, everybody who works in a kitchen, everybody who works in the trades, everybody who's a carpenter, everybody who has to do anything smokes weed daily on the job around heavy machinery. And like, there's other research, I don't have it on me right now, but there is other research that like shows that like cannabis is not really associated with accidents from using heavy machinery, or at least the risk are majorly overblown. And you know, so like the idea of like, it's, well, it threatens educational attainment is that it's like, I dropped out of college to read more books, and then I stopped reading books to learn more about life, so I wouldn't just be stunted in that way either, you know. It's like, so I don't believe in school being the most important measurement of how your life's going. And I think that is really, yeah, it makes you it lowers your academic performance, but also at the same time, I'm running the show and talking to you, you know. It's like, I decided to go somewhere else with my life than just, you know, like, I mean, if you want to talk about it, like, yeah, like, my entire life I was told, become a pharmacist, become a pharmacist, become a pharmacist, because I'm, you know, an addict, and you'll be able to give me pills for free, you know. And then that woman died from Xanax withdrawal. And it's just like, you know, like, I don't see the importance of this stuff, where it's like, I don't think that pharmacology helps people that much. I mean, I think that there are some good things, but I also think that, like, the harder you try to treat some stuff, the worse it fucking gets. So, you know, and like, yeah, my grandma wasn't fucking there by the time she died, you know. She didn't even know who I was. She'd see me and she thought she was seeing like several other different people at different times. And, you know, I don't know, like, the pills didn't really seem to make that better. You know, they're still just fucking out to lunch. But the reason why I just bring that up to say is that it's like, it's not the losers that I know who smoke weed. It's the people who actually do things. It's the people who build your house. It's the people who make the electric work. It's the people who do all of these things, you know? Those are the people that I know who are using cannabis. And like, that's really the defining attributes to me, is that working class roots to it. So in addition, results from exploratory, I mean, also, like, why do you think that we're talking about the makeshift spear? Why do you think we're talking about cannabis? Like, all this stuff is the symbol of the proletariat. You know, it's a symbol of at least the working class now, where it's like, you can get a spear, you can get weed. You might not be able to get, you know, antipsychotic medication every month. You might not be able to afford that, especially if you don't have insurance. And you might not be able to afford a gun. You might not be able to afford ammo. But this show is about trying to help make lifestyle things and try to give you options that require time more than anything else. You know, getting good with a spear takes time. Getting better with your, like, self takes time. And, like, hopefully, you know, it's like, that's where we're trying to help with things. We're trying to, like, change minds. We're not trying to, like, fix chemical compounds, you know? So, in addition, results from the exploratory analysis suggest that sex may moderate the association between cannabis use and some aspects of motivation. Surprisingly, females who reported higher levels of self-efficacy at baseline also reported greater escalation in cannabis use over time. This association was not significant for males. These findings are not consistent with those of prior studies that have examined associations between cannabis use and self-efficacy, and do not suggest an amotivational syndrome in cannabis-using females. Rather, although speculative, they suggest that greater confidence in their academic skill may lead adolescent females, but not males, to escalate in their cannabis use without worrying about related academic consequences. More work is needed to determine whether this finding can be replicated in other samples. And again, I would say it may be because not, like, it's that greater confidence, but that greater knowing that the way you are already will be rewarded. You know, meanwhile, with men that have greater self-efficacy, they know that the more natural they act, the more punished they will be. So that's where it's like, I think that just kind of intuitively is what that looks like to me. But, I mean, I could definitely be wrong. I'm just, you know, essentially shooting the shit. We recently reviewed the literature examining effects of cannabis use on motivation and reward sensitivity, concluding that although cross-sectional evidence is needed, it results from 2 longitudinal studies lend partial support to amotivational syndrome. Findings from the current study, however, are not consistent with those of the previous longitudinal studies. There are several possible explanations for this inconsistency. First, our studies focused on adolescents, while the previous longitudinal studies utilized adult samples. It is possible that the negative effects of cannabis use on motivation may become apparent only at the highest level of use, or with greater cumulative use than that observed in the adolescents in our sample. Adolescents were 14 to 17, making this one of the youngest samples studied concerning cannabis use and motivation. Although, by design, the majority of the participants reported some cannabis use at study onset, only 15% reported heavy 3 times week daily use at baseline, with approximately 1/4 of the sample reaching near daily use by the final assessment. And we also excluded participants who, at the time of screening, reported very heavy cannabis use, or whose answers suggested the presence of a heavy cannabis use disorder. Thus, it is possible that the adolescents in our sample may not have engaged in heavy cannabis use for sufficiently long duration for reductions in motivation to manifest. Future studies should continue to examine consequences of cannabis use during adolescence to examine possible dose-dependent relationships between cannabis use and motivation. So yeah, we're at 24 minutes in. I feel like we get it. All this stuff's interesting and it's right there, but I feel like if I just keep reading it, we're all gonna tune out. So interesting. Basically, but like this also pair this with the other study that we discussed that found that cannabis is not related to amotivation, or does not at least directly cause it. And then I wanted to come over here where, well, cannabis improves stuttering. That's interesting. Let's see, where were we? There's something that
This is a case study about somebody who had it was a 20-year-old who found that after smoking weed, it helped him develop out of his stutter. So that's just interesting. And this is for the epileptic condition. And they found that while adverse events occurred in 96% of patients, the common adverse effects were convulsion, diarrhea, pyrexia, which is essentially like, pyre, like fire. And then so it's like you just get hot, like a fever. And somnolence, which is like too much sleep. So that's just, what could happen. But what they found was that it is a tolerable safety profile, demonstrating long-term benefits of CBD therapy for patients with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. And I mean, again, weed's not perfect. It's not gonna be great for everybody, but it could, with these people, it's seeing a reduction in, a 48 to 71% reduction in seizures and a 48 to 68 reduction through 156 weeks. And 87% or more of patients/caregivers reported improvement in their overall condition. So, it's like, it's not that you might not vomit. It's not that your stomach, all these negative things that happen to it. That's understandable, and that's totally. Don't feel weird, and don't feel like that's a hidden part of weed. The negative aspects of it are definitely real and definitely there, and there's no reason to try to get away from it. But this reads much more calm and much more manageable, much more approachable than the side effect profile of your average fucking ADHD or schizophrenia or whatever medication. So this is the Pure Green research. We're gonna go into this with its own time, and I want to talk about this with him more. Amazing. Love Deborah, love Steve. Don't know Matthew, but would love to talk to them. These people are incredibly smart, just really smart, do a great job on controlling information and making sure that it's real data. So I'm going to be reading through this soon and discussing it. And another thing that I really love about Pure Green is that they focus on trying to get cannabinoids that work, where it's water-soluble cannabinoids are able to be absorbed by the body. So the way that they do it is that they take a cannabinoid and then they put it into a container. So you have this container which is one sort of degradable, and then you have this material inside of it which is not, because cannabinoids are oil soluble. But if you package it in a container that is water soluble, you can trick the body into absorbing the water soluble material, and then once that container, if you have it so that that gets broken easily after being absorbed, then the cannabinoid is already within the bloodstream and able to enter the body. And hypothetically, it could even work within 2 minutes, because that's how long it takes for your blood to cycle. But 10-20 minutes, rather than a traditional edible, which happens an hour and 30 minutes, because you have to digest it, and the cannabinoids actually have to hit your body. And so I think stuff like that is very, very interesting, and much more. I think that has real consumer value, because they work with CBD, which obviously you're not going to get crazy effects or anything. And so I think that they really do have this major potential to change, especially elder demographics, but anybody who's health conscious, where there's water soluble, clean cannabinoids are way less scary than anything else. And that's why I just really am happy to get back in contact and to see them publishing. Because again, it is, it's a private company, but they are working, and it is like that. But again, I think honestly here, I do think that the private industry will do better work. You know, because I just think that the government has a fucking interesting track record. Let's say an interesting track record with cannabis. So, but another thing is that exercise increased. So exercise increases anandamide and another endocannabinoid. So this is a follow-up study where they've recently demonstrated that, and this is a different group of people. This has nothing to do with pure green. We're just going back into some more research. We recently demonstrated that moderate intensity aerobic exercise delivered during the consolidation of fear extinction learning reduced threat expectancy during a test of extinction recall among women with PTSD. These findings suggest that exercise may be a potential candidate for improving the efficacy of exposure-based therapies, which are hypothesized to work via the mechanism of fear extinction learning. The purpose of the secondary analysis was to examine whether the exercise-induced increases in circulating concentrations of candidate biomarkers, endocannabinoids, and so endocannabinoids, anandamide, and BDNF, and homovenilic acid mediate the effects of exercise on extinction recall. So this reminds me of those things where you break a bunch of stuff. You know, where it's like you go into a room and you just like break stuff with like a baseball bat, and it's like, you know, getting into that sort of mood, while it might look a little bit aggressive or like, you know, just really like that. I think it's an interesting exercise because I do think that there is something to exercise. Or, you know, it is an interesting thing to do because I think that the exercise does help, you know, with kind of just getting some more stuff moving. And I think that especially if you're doing that at the same time that you're working through some stuff, could be a worthwhile exercise. So they found that the exercise-induced increases in anandamide and BDNF appear to play a role in enhancing consolidation of fear extinction learning, thereby leading to reduced threat expectancies following reinstatement among women with PTSD. So anandamide and endocannabinoids, good. They help with that, and they help with fear extinction and that sort of stuff, which is also, and I just tie that into, like, you know, the whole conversation about holistic health, where it's like, are you eating right? Are you exercising right? Do you feel like you're a part of your community? Do you feel like that you can regularly just interact with humans? I think that there's like, because like the problem with criticizing America is that there's so much to get into at once. And I think that attacking the car is a useful way to get at it. Because then I think that people immediately understand that it's like, oh shit, I live somewhere. I drive 20 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes to work. And I drive like 40 minutes to the bar to hang out with my friend. And I drive 20 minutes to the grocery store bare minimum. You know, and it's just like this. I think that people then see that they're like, wait, I couldn't do anything without my car. And then they start to understand that it's like basically the car is an extension of their foot. Their car is sort of a pseudo foot, that it's replaced their idea of basic mobility. And then it's like, okay, so if you can understand that and you can wrap your head around that, let's think about alternative models and let's think about what we could do differently about that. Because if we wanted to, we could go back to how, like, even 70 years ago, American cities were built, which was, I mean, even what, like 40 years ago, maybe. That they were walkable and, you know, they were understandable. There are these communities and things like that. And it's like, you don't even think about knowing your neighbor because you've had so many experiences in common that of course you do. You know your neighbors from the next 2 neighborhoods over. You know, like, you've just gotten so used to being a part of things that it becomes hyper naturalized. And like, you just sort of feel like those people are sort of an extension. You feel like an extension of that unit of people. You know, where it's just like, it doesn't matter. But even like, you know, it's like there's even like the state conscious, you know, like there's these things that people make people feel a part of something. That's probably fine. point is that if you feel like you're a part of your city, if you feel like you're a part of your neighborhood, if you feel like you're a part of where you live, you then have access to human beings that you can simply go talk to. You know, it's like you have elders at your disposal that you can go to for advice. You have like opportunities to volunteer and try to make the world a little bit of a better place. You have opportunities to meet your peers to try to like make more friends or maybe connect on a romantic level. You know, like you have like all these things. You know, you can go to church. You can volunteer, or not volunteer, but you can go to night classes. You can, you know, get a job. You can do all of these things without a car and just walking around your neighborhood. And like that level of connectivity, I think deeply brings peace to people. Because then it makes them feel like they're, you know, I feel like when everybody says they're lonely, it's basically like FOMO from the rest of human history, where it's just like you don't feel like you're part of the experience of life. And so then I think that it's like if you can get to know your surroundings and then walk and do things like that, then you're going to be more motivated to just, you know, have a lifestyle that's like all of a sudden you're like trying to, you know, like something, you can do something as simple as just like going outside and spending, like, I know it's like fucking stupid to say stuff like this, but you can go outside without your phone and just stand and just listen to the silence and like listen to the sirens and listen to the bird calls and listen to the whatever and just watch the sky for an hour, you know, and like you can just do that. And it's, you know, it's something that's important to do, I think, you know, and like so is walking and so is biking and so is gardening and so are all of these really basic, boring things that you wouldn't think are like the defining aspects of what it is to be alive, but ultimately end up being the defining aspects of what it is to be alive. And that's where it's like, I think if we really work on this stuff, then we can really, I mean, like, to put it one way, then we can really save money on mental health, you know? Then we can really not have as many issues going on with people who... Then we won't really have as many issues going on with people who, you know, are just suffering from unfair construction. That's the way I basically see it. And that's why I think it's important to talk about cars and things like that, is that it's like, I think that if you had a more gentle and compassionately designed environment, you'd see people doing a lot better on average. And speaking of compassionately designed environments, let's look at some Jules De Bruycker. And I'm just going through this and picking at stuff that looks good to my eyeball. So this guy, dead. He's been dead for like 100 years. But I think you can see in his work, this is obviously like Romanesque. It looks very Spanish with like the bulls and the columns. You know, so it's pretty. Same thing. These though, because these are like his city of Ghent. Just, you know, I feel like as people who are not, you know, it's like since we got skyscrapers, you know, it's like this is a city. You know, it's not a farm. It's not a suburb. It's just your average garden variety city, you know? So, like, this is where it's like, I think that there is, you know, when you're talking about not designing around the motor vehicle, it's like, this is a street. This is just, you know, like, this is an intersection, essentially. This is what they can be. You know, it's like, well, we have art fairs and stuff like that. And it's like, yes, but you have to do that. You can't just like, have an environment where people naturally feel comfortable congregating, you know, and just like being around. Like this is like, it just seems so quiet. Like that's what astounds me about certain kinds of urban design, is that you can see real tranquility and peace in the environment. And I think that that's where I get this like real bone to pick with people who are always like, you know, it's like, I need to go into nature. I need to go into nature. And it's like, okay, I get it, but we can also design cities to be more relaxing. And also we can make nature nature. where there's that point, you know, where it's like if you responsibly design cities so that the urban area is dense and sprawled out horizontally, so it's not just skyscrapers, and so therefore it's affordable and also more environmentally like responsible, because I mean, again, cars make kids schizophrenic, so walking is literally, you're saving kids, man. And I feel like that one, I feel like we can win people over with that one. That's like going to be a platform for me, because I'm just going to keep looking more and more into pollution. Because if we already have all these environmentalist movements, how can it be an environmentalist that drives around? Like, are you kidding? This is the thing where it's like, I don't want to hear all these radical environmentalist opinions when it's like, dude, yeah, sure, you might be a vegan, but you drive a car. What are you talking about? You know? Like, yeah, I eat affordable meals. Like, the thing about ground beef is that it's 1,500 calories for $5, you know? So, like, with environments like this, you're going to be incentivized to walk. You're going to have this much more communal-oriented society. And by doing so, you can limit urban sprawl to being urban primarily, and you don't really have these endless suburban sprawls that are in between a like lived area and nature. You know, like it's just a house on a hill with a yard. Why? Why do you need a 3-acre yard? You know, because then it's like you have the city, and then you have the wall. And then outside of that, you have farms, you know? And then outside of that, you got nothing. You know, it's just fucking forest and like all that. It's just unmastered nature, as it should be. Because you should just let nature be nature. And then the city should be the city. And if you want to go live and fuck off nowhere, you can go live and fuck off nowhere. No problem with that. And if you really want to be around nature, you can. But I think that most people would just be happy in reasonably designed spaces. You know, it's like, you got two people selling wares, and it doesn't look, you know, this looks like the corner in Detroit. This literally looks like you're just driving by and it's fucking trash week. You know, like, and it's like also what I love about this painter is that these aren't particularly beautiful people. They're very, it's humble in scope. I'm pretty sure this is a self-portrait. That or that one. Oh, I don't know. But we got two painters, it looks like. Anyways. You know, I also love the slight, like, witch feel to a lot of his, like, old women. I think it's a little sorcery. The DIA has one of them. I want to get it tattooed, but I don't know where to really, like, fit it into my body. Like the figures back there. It's funny because also I think you can see, if you study classic art, cartoons are sketches. And that's where the word cartoon came from, was like sketches, and like that's what cartoons are moving sketches. Like they're unfinished pieces that or something. I don't know how to quite bring around all the endpoints together. This is pretty. This is pretty. Like that's what I want. I think this literally reminds me of, there's this film adaptation of Hunger. I mean, shit. Could I we're gonna try to pull it up. Not the Hunger Games. Fuck it, no. But the house he stays at looks a lot like that. Which I guess is probably just because it's like a European design. You know, it's not even like a special kind of house. It's just like, you know, an affordable and straightforward design. Which I assume is why most designs are popular throughout history. Is because they're cost effective and functional. What's this? This is like America. This is literally this. I cannot distinguish this between this art and like the American like Revolution. This looks like this is the freshest SoundCloud cover
this fucking year. This is the freshest hip hop cover this fucking year. Like, you know, like when Kanye and Kid Cudi were like kids eat acid. Like, bro, you could have. I know their cover is very good. Their cover is very good. But what the fuck? Who is this guy? Who are these guys? Is that his hair? I don't know. That's like an autopsy. Got an open. What the fuck? Are those living eyes or those dead eyes? This is death alive, so I assume he's still alive. We got skeletons that are alive. This is fucking, yeah. It's dark, but it's good as shit. Paintings of paintings, always fun, pretty. This reminds me of like Pissarro, but you know, because it's like this is not, you can't, like, this is a literal city. It's Ghent, but you know, so it's like you got these big buildings, right? But you also got these primarily little buildings. This is pretty. Oh. How do I focus on things? I don't. The thing is, I didn't do that before I started smoking weed. That's my problem with them saying that weed causes problems, is that all the problems I had before I started smoking weed. When I started smoking weed, and when I stopped smoking weed, it feels like before I started smoking weed, when I had all these problems that were kind of insurmountable. But like after I started smoking weed, it was like, yeah, I can deal with it. I can deal with it. There are things that, I mean, I feel like it just, for me, the biggest thing that I focused on trying to learn, and I think I did really make progress on, is gratitude and appreciation. Just trying to see things for, trying to see the good that could be, you know? Because maybe everything's bad, but also maybe things are good. And like if you see things as like, what could be good, then I feel like you're at a much different position that allows you kind of just, you know, feel that. That's probably going to be my phone background. That is probably going to be my phone background. Wow. Pretty. And maybe I'm a simple soul. Maybe I'm a simple guy. But like this shit, like, I'm gonna, here's a toast. Here's a toast to it. That's alright, I opened the window. But there is something to the gentle density of these urban scenes that I think that we all crave and we all like. Like that's why we like Kiki's Delivery Service. That's why we like Ghibli. Yet people I don't think are aware of that. Because then they're always like, well, what about new pipes? You want updated stuff, da 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 da. And it's like, well, the value of these houses aren't that they're old. The value of these houses is that they're survived because they're old. Or they're not, they survived because they're good. That's why they can be old. It's because they're good houses, which is why they lasted, like, sometimes 800 years. And so it's like when we're building, you know, when we're building out in buttfuck hell, Michigan, why not build stuff like that? You know? Why everything like a trailer park? Why everything with a driveway? Why not some places that are for walkers? Why not some places with an alternative option that inherently has inbuilt exercise and like things like that that allow you to just live alternatively, truly. It's very difficult to vote this stuff into, like, how do you even phrase a bill? You know? I mean, I guess, like, city councils and things like that. But, I mean, it's like, I feel like if you build something, people want it. So it's like, I feel like the people designed every American city a certain way. And because of that, the demand is there. But I feel like there are places that would be certainly willing to try. I guess that's like, we have no car zones that are cropping up and stuff like that, which is a good step. But I think that the buildings are necessary. And maybe I am just a sucker for like the style of architecture, but it's good.
I fuck with this guy. I fuck with this guy heavy. Nice. That's I know that's not why, but that's funny. I like that. That lines up nice. Good portraits. I like it. I like the style because I think that it communicates something more honest. People say that he used to draw the souls of people. These are ghost. These are ghost. Are they dead? Probably. Pretty. Fuck with that. The Water Zoo. Is that not Waterloo? Yeah. I know I'm just beating a dead horse, but that's... I mean, painting-wise, I really appreciate his style because I think it is in that uncanny valley between realism and impressionism, where he has all of the skeleton of things down. He can definitely pick out a building. He can definitely pick out a human. He can definitely pick out a street. You know, he understands the shape of all these things, but he also has a flair which unmistakably shows the craft of it. You know, where it's unmistakably a painting that is self-aware that is a painting. It is not fully committed to realism. But at the same time, it doesn't lose touch with it at any point. None of this seems like warped perspective, yet all of it is heavily stylized. It's more idealized. So maybe it's idealism. I really like that stuff because I like that it is drawing... to me, it seems like it's a vernacular. Like it's an artist language. This is a language that he developed and that he made, and I think that it represents this sort of ownership over the world, ownership over the world around him, that he was able to translate shapes into a creation that became coherent. If I see his work, I recognize his work. And I think that in itself makes, it's like that's what I mean by a language. And I guess that's sort of obvious. But I really respect when artists do that because it's not that they don't understand proportion. It's that they're choosing to everything that is different seems to be on purpose. And you have that same feeling in minimalism and postmodernism, but it's like, do you really need me to trust you that you can do the whole thing? Meanwhile, here, it's like he does the whole thing, but he decides to slant it. I don't know, I'm also getting irritated with that idea that it's like it takes, 5 years or whatever to learn to paint like a master, but it takes a lifetime to learn how to paint like a child. It's like, well, my brain doesn't really seem to change that much as I develop older. And I mean that in terms of like, I've always wanted to make art like I do. I just get more refined and more capable, and my perspective, grows. So I get better at what I do, but it's not like there's this radical transformation where there's like, this childhood genius that there's not, like this insight that just gave me everything. I think that maybe you could think that with, I guess like, yeah, to me that just sounds godless because it's like after you're a child, you just ultimately end up with your beliefs and then you form an irrational experience based off that, which I think is the preservation of childhood wonder, is just taking something for granted and then making it into a language. Whereas, like, always idolizing that sort of wonder is like, well, yeah, but at one day, the next step in that relationship is developing something. And this is something that looks developed to me. Because I assume that there's, we can look at the sketches, so if we go to, let's go to home. We look at the etching, all this stuff looks finished, which I guess is not the right example. So then let's go to drawings. from what I can recall, I mean, he has surreal pieces, but I wouldn't be surprised where it's like, you know, obviously this is in some way figurative, you know, because there's things that are left out, you know, and you're getting these sort of more, as you looking through a journal, you know, as somebody's developing their understanding of their own style, you certainly get these weird glimpses. That one just looks like a storybook. That one's complete. That's fucking good. But you know, it's like this, it's just a broken wall. You know? How many steps is this from just like a line? You know, you can do less and less, and it's like, well, it takes, you know, and this is surreal. This is fucking good. I also want this one tattooed because, god damn, this has got also good. This is Dark Souls. Yeah, so he's like the Dark Souls of painting. I know. That's just, he's just good. There's not really a point I can make with that, but yeah, I do think that you can see abstraction inherent in like every artist, you know. Like, what is going on here? I feel like from this sketch you could do some Picasso bullshit in like 2 pieces, you know. Anyways, check out Zelooperz. This is a great video. The Van Gogh's left ear, you know, so just great set design, great all that's going on. Very prolific guy, makes a lot of content, and that is awesome. That is funny. That is a funny list of people. Yeah, so all this stuff is great. He's been making music for 6 years now. Jesus Christ, yeah. It has been a minute. But I think criminally underrated. I would have assumed he was got like 3 million hits on a song. I Should Be Dead. 143,000 views seems like a fucking psyop, because I feel like that shit. I mean, why isn't TikTok on that? TikTok should make that song annoying. They should make that just overplayed incredibly. And I mean, the rest of it, it's like, yeah, he makes it respectable. He definitely has a respectable audience, but the boy's got the strength to carry much more. The boy's got, he's the man, the legend, you know. I could not recommend his music more. Starting point, JJZ. Or Fiesta Fiesta. Or, I mean, I Should Be Dead, honestly, I would not say is the best starting point. I got the Danny Brown feature, so that one. But Van Gogh's Left Ear, I would say, is the best starting point. So that's what I'm going to recommend and leave in the description. Check them out. Always. This is, there's a lot, so they have a lot of his, De Bruycker's references on this website too, which I think is very fascinating. But I think we're going to end it with the window. Alright, that guy's cool. Again, we're going to end it with the window. Thank you so much for hanging out. Hopefully you learned some stuff. If you're interested in anything, please check it out below. Always source all my material. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to have a discussion. I'd love to have one. So, always available. Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. That's our show. 3 hours every week. And I'll see you on Friday. Thanks so much for tuning in. This has been Karhlyle Fletcher. And also check out stuff on Cannabis Tech. I'm gonna be around there soon too. So see ya and have a good rest of your day.